Hi everyone, my name is Darius and I'm an intuitive coach. What does that mean? It means that I am an intuitive and I have chosen to not go down the path of being a medium and tuning into spirits and acting as the guide between, the living and the dead. What it does mean is that I have chosen to use my gifts to work with other people to teach them how to listen to their own intuitive guidance so that way they don't need people like me to be that medium for them. They can tune in for themselves. Um, Part of this video series is about teaching people in one way, um, whether it be through audio, through visual, um, and so that way it just helps piece together things for them. So today we're going to talk about the different psychic gifts one can have. There's a wide range. Um, so let's just jump into it. So let's first talk about clairvoyance. Clairvoyance is probably one of the most common ones that people are aware of. I think people tend to think about clairvoyance as being able to see the future. Clairvoyance is a little bit more wide wide range or more how do I say that, it's bigger than that. So clairvoyance can be broken down into three categories. You could be able to precognition, where you could see events before they happen. There is retrocognition, where you could see events that have happened. And then there's remote viewing, where you could see things that are happening outside of your normal range. um, Precognition is sometimes you might see something where an event before it happens. I feel like a good example to bring up, if you have Netflix, there's a show called Surviving Death, and in the first episode, I think it is a great. I really like the first episode because they talk about a woman who developed clairvoyance. And one of the things that she experienced was she was pregnant and she just had the vision of her dying during childbirth. And I will leave you to watching that. But that is, precognition, seeing an event before it happens. Retrocognition is being able to sometimes either touch items or sometimes photos are a really good trigger, um, where you can look at a photo and almost get a glimpse into that moment in time. Remote viewing. Remote viewing is something that what comes to mind is that if you're really interested, Google about the CIA, and I think it was the Iranian Revolution, uh, about remote viewing, where hostages were taken, and the CIA actually utilized people, a group of people who had that skill set to gain information about what was going on in that time because there was no other way they could get information. Real life shit. You should check it out. So that is about clairvoyance. It's not just a one-way thing. There are other avenues that you can go with that. So let's talk about claircognizance. Claircognizance is about it's clear knowing. So it's just getting downloads of information. Um, that is one that I utilize a lot. Sometimes when I'm engaging with other people, um, I get information about maybe about some of their issues. And when I get information about someone's issues, it's not anything where it's kind of like gossip. It's more about this is kind of a roadblock that they have. How can they move forward, or what information do they need to know that might help them with their their development. Another way that claircognizance works is, let's say you get information about a job that you are not like, say you get a job that maybe you were once excited about, but out of nowhere you're like, you shouldn't take this job. um, that, I guess that can be broken down into two ways, depending on how, if you're feeling it or if you just get information through your brain where you're just kind of like, something is telling you don't take it. Another way clear cognizance work is that, say, you get really inspired about something that you're doing and you just get this like detailed game plan of like how you're supposed to execute it. Uh, that is another way that kind of it works for me, where sometimes if I'm engaging with someone, I kind of get like a uh how do you say that, like I'm writing out a prescription pad of things that they're supposed to do. uh the other way, yeah, how to execute. um Another one that you can get is, say that you are engaging with someone, and as you're kind of listening to the conversation and you're paying attention, something is coming through and it's telling you that this person is actively lying to you without any you, and you have no other information that is telling you this. It's just something is like coming through and being like, this person is lying to you. That is another way that clear cognizance works. Another one is clear audience. Clear audience can work in a couple different ways. Clear audience works for a lot of mediums in the sense that sometimes when they are opening up their energy, they are able to hear the spirits communicate with them in the manner that I'm communicating with you. You can hear their voice, you can hear their tone, you can hear their voice as if they were still living. Clear audience doesn't work for me like that. It's interesting because sometimes when I am engaging with someone or there's information that's coming through, it, it can be very different in the way that clear cognizance works, where I just automatically know it, or I just get that download of information, versus clear audience. It's kind of like I get dialogue that goes through my head, where it's, I don't know how else to describe. It's like I can hear the dialogue go through, but I'm not actually hearing the tone of voice or the, I don't know how to say, the characterizations that is in the voice. I don't know how to say that. But it's just, yeah, you just get downloads of information in a way that someone's just communicating with you. Um, Two smaller, I don't want to say that they're small. There's clear aliens, and that is the ability to smell. That is another one that does work for a lot of mediums, where when they're communicating to someone who has passed, for someone for the living, they might, spirit might find a way to trigger their sense of smell, where they're like, I don't know why I'm smelling, smoke, and maybe that person died in a fire. That is just an example. Uh, there was a gentleman that I was talking to, and it was interesting because he was telling me that he knows when his grandmother is near because he can smell her. And he said it is a very distinct smell. And sometimes in moments of, crisis for him, when he just needed support or whatever, or I don't want to say whatever, but you know what I mean, where he felt very alone, and then he would catch a whiff of his grandmother, and then instantly he would be like, I'm feeling supported in whatever decision that he was making. There is clear gustance, which is the ability to taste. Again, another one with mediums. Sometimes they might. There is an episode in Long Island Medium where I remember just observing her skill set. Um, and she was all like, why am I tasting blood? And for mediums and also I think people who are intuitive, it's kind of like a game of playing detective and charades. You're constantly getting information and you're trying to figure out like how does this fit into the puzzle. And for her, when she's like, why am I tasting blood? It was just one more piece of the puzzle to talk about a car accident where, there was internal bleeding and, you know, just fascinating. Another interesting thing is that there are people who have that skill set where when they are tuning in, they have the ability to taste colors, which is something that, when you think about, what does the color orange taste like? What does the color purple, red, yellow, green, blue, violet, white, black? There's all of these different colors, and for whatever reason, their brain can go in and taste colors. Then there is, hold on. There is, I have to actually write it down because I can easily lose my train of thought. Clairvoyance, claircognizance, clairaudience, clairalience, clairgustance. All right, clairsentience. This is the big one. Why is this the big one? I think this is probably, uh, it's one of the lesser knowns, but it's also very known. I feel like when people think about psychic gifts, clairvoyance is always like the common one. But clairsentience, you might not know it as being clairsentience, but you would probably hear it as about being an empath. And clairsentience is about feeling. Um, Feelings can happen in a variety of ways. You can feel it in physical sensations. Some like one of the common ones is that when you get goosebumps. Um, Sometimes you can feel like you get tapping on the head. Um, you can get body shivers. Another one way that it works is that you can get in gut feelings where your gut is responding um, that something isn't right, or something that is, you feel that you should make this decision based on your gut. um Empaths, clairsentience, physical feelings. Sometimes I feel like being clairsentient means that you have an open energy field, and sometimes you could be absorbing energy. And two ways that um, you have to kind of pass energy can either be through tears, and I think tears is probably one of the more common ones, because sometimes tears can have a variety of different meanings. And for someone who has had to and go through the process of understanding that tears can have very different meanings, um, you just kind of it's important that when you feel tears coming that you release it, because when you bottle it up, it means that you're not allowing the energy to flow through you. And that can just be emotions. It could be positive things, happy things. Generally, when it's you're talking about negative energy, that happens in two ways. You could have instant diarrhea, which I'll just say it sucks. And you can be nauseous. Um, and I'll go a little bit more into the negative ones in a minute. But there's a wide variety of different types of empaths. Uh, there are intellectual empaths. These are people, you might see them a lot in teachers, where when they're talking to someone and they're trying to teach them something, you can literally watch the cogs in their brain move. And if you're trying to teach a lesson and you can see someone who is just not getting it, So you, as you are tuning into them and you are observing their thought process, you find the way to um, modify whatever it is that you're trying to say in a way that they can best understand and process and learn said lesson. There are physical empaths. These are people who can tune into your physical being. They might be able to like look at you and tune into you and be like, what's going on with your shoulder? Um, or find out, parts of your body where you ache. Um, Physical empaths say if you watch videos where like someone gets hurt, you might feel that as if you're hurting. Um, Another interesting one that I experience or have experienced, I have a lot of women in my life, and sometimes I would be tuning into them while they were on their period, or PMSing. And there would be times where I'm like, I would just get cramps. And, or I would, and this kind of, I would get cramps sometimes. Um, and it would hurt and it would be weird because I am not familiar with, abdominal pain. And, I just remember there was like one time where I was tuning into one of my girlfriends, and, we're going to pause for a quick second. A lot of these psychic gifts tend to overlap, and it's hard to figure out what you're feeling because if you don't have the awareness and the knowledge to know that, some things are two very different things, you might be looking at all the symptoms and see it as one big ball and not realizing yet that they're two very different things that are just kind of overlapping. So going into being an emotional empath, you have the ability to sometimes tune into other people's emotions. And in the way with one of my friends who was, experiencing the wide range of, things that come with your period, I was having cramps, and then out of nowhere, I was like emotional, and I had no, like, I just wanted to cry. And I remember going through the whole thing where it's like, I just really want a bag of chips. I was like, my stomach hurts. I was like, I don't know why. And I just want to cry. And my friend was like laughing in the corner and was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? And she's like, I'm on my period. And like, she's like, this, you're literally speaking my truth right now. And me not knowing and just being like, this shit sucks. Um, but that was just one aspect of where like the physical and the emotional was going in. So moving on from that story, let's talk more about the emotional empaths. Emotional empaths can tune into the emotional well-being of others. And one of the things that I think that really sucks about sometimes being an emotional empath is that you there's just all it takes is something to trigger you, and you can just be like like just crying. It could be, you know, movies where, and the thing about actors is that actors have the ability to tune into emotions and release them, and that is why they're actors. For emotional empaths, sometimes we tune into the feeling that that actor is portraying, and it's just, it is what it is. um, but how sometimes that applies into your everyday life is that, if you go into high energy situations, I feel like a lot of times I talk about, before there was online shopping, when people would actually go to the mall for, the holiday season to find, all the Christmas presents and whatnot. It used to be, I mean, it still is overwhelming because some people still do that. Or the whole idea of Black Friday shopping where people are in a rush, people are looking for a need to, like, it's almost like adrenaline, like a fix that they're trying to get, where they are a lot of anxiety. A lot of people might be angry by how other people are not respecting their boundaries, or maybe that they're searching for something and they can't find it, or that it's like no longer available. Um, People who are emotional empaths pick up on all of that, and it doesn't matter whether or not you know them or not. Sometimes, it could be someone who's like right next to you, and it's a lot to process because you spend a lot of time being like, is what I'm feeling mine, or is this something that's in, again, playing charades or detective, or is this attached to somebody else? Emotional empaths, sometimes it's very apparent when you're driving. Say you're on the freeway and you just see someone who is hauling ass, and then they come up on behind you, and say you're already going 75, 85, and this person wants to go 95, and you can, without even knowing, you are already tuning into them and knowing that this person's in a rush, this person might be angry, this person is agitated, whatever. um so that is kind of like the emotional empath. It's a lot to process, and it sucks because it's, their emotions, especially when they're not your emotions. There are crystal empaths. um Crystal empaths are people who utilizes crystals, and stones as a way to strengthen their energy. They can use these. I utilize stones when I do my meditations, because what I'm doing is that if I'm going to open up my energy, it is important that I anchor my energy to a space so that way I feel grounded and I'm not feeling like I'm just opening myself up and I'm not tethered to anything. Um, Crystal empaths can also utilize stones for their environment. You can kind of see, behind me, I have some stones here. And what these stones kind of do is that they help create the environment, the energy of the environment that I want. So that way I don't feel like I'm having to do, um, all the work. Crystal empaths, there are place empaths. These are people who can walk into a room sometimes. Like, if you've ever walked into a room and you're like, this shit feels tense as fuck. Like, and maybe what had happened is that maybe there was an argument between two people, and, they decided to not finish it or come to a resolution. They decided to squash it because now there's company. And even though that, um, maybe they decided to, brush it aside, the place empath is the one that's coming in and can feel it. Um, Place empath, these are also people who can walk into a room, not necessarily just feel the tension, but say, you're going into a house where, mm, what's a good way of describing that? Say that there is a house for sale and you are going to do an open house. You know nothing about the house, its prior inhabitants, and say that there was a lot of domestic violence that took place in the house. There is nothing that is giving that off, but you are walking into the room and it just feels heavy. It feels angry. It feels, like there's fear and sadness. Um, that is one example. Another one can be, buildings that are really old, that could be haunted, where maybe some, horrific things took place. I feel like I'm talking a lot about the negative because the negative generally tends to stand out. Um, these can also be buildings where, say, where a lot of love had transpired, where you walk into, someone's home and it just feels loving and it feels happy. Those are things that place empaths can feel. There are animal empaths. These are people who have a special bond and connection to animals. People who stand out in my mind of animal empaths is Dr. Jane Goodall. Um, there are some animal empaths who tend to have an affinity toward a specific animal. And we'll just talk about, Dr. Jane Goodall, where her affinity was toward apes. Um, it was apes, right? I'm all chimpanzees. I think it was apes. Or we can talk about the late Steve Irwin, where he was just able to read and understand animals in a very different way that maybe average people could understand. And there might be a lot of people who are animal empaths that they don't even realize it. And say you have, there's a lot of people who have pets where they can tune in and they know what their pet is thinking. They know, they can read their pet's emotion. They know when their pet is scared. That is an ability of you tuning into your pet and having a strong connection with them. There are environmental empaths. These are the people who can feel the energy of geographic locations, generally maybe about like earth energy, where I feel like there's a lot of environmental activists who tend to be earth empaths, where they are watching the earth change, where, you know, rivers and streams and lakes are drying up, and, plant life is dying all around it. Sometimes they can physically be affected by that. Item empaths. I feel like I need to pause for a second and go back to place empaths. Is that I talked about buildings that you can tune into, but I want to talk about land. And talking about the land is a little bit different than talking about, earth empaths or environmental empaths, because you're not talking about, the earth in general. You're talking about that specific land. And, you could be talking about lands where, let's talk about Native American burial sites. Say that is some sacred land and you are coming up on that. Place empaths can just feeling like you're intruding on space that you are not welcome on or that you shouldn't be. Uh, Place empaths could be places where, say there, I always talk about the Battle of Gettysburg, because that is where, the Civil War, an area where Civil War took place, and a lot of people died, and they died in a very tragic way, where not only were they physically, dying, but also emotionally scared, where they weren't able to say goodbye to their loved ones. And, it was just a place where a lot of fear was. And place empaths, you might be coming in on land where you just feel it. And then again, it's very different than, going to an area where, you feel heightened by, the lush greenery, waterfalls of environmental empath. There are item empaths. Item empaths are people who have the ability to touch items and are able to pick up information about them. Uh, One good example is that I do my best to at least teach people about um, buying vintage jewelry. The reason being is that jewelry are, whether they be stones or whether they be actual, like the metals, um, that can store the energy of the person who owned it before. So if that person was not a happy person, uh, you are essentially taking that, and you could, clear the energy, but it takes effort to actually do that. Um, you could also be getting sometimes, if you say you're getting someone's wedding ring and it was a very lovely marriage, you might be feeling all the positive aspects of that ring. Um, Say the person crossed over or didn't cross over and they have an attachment to that ring because that was their ring. They might not be happy that someone is now wearing that and might show displeasure about that. So I remember there's an actual story of, I went into an antique store and I remember just looking at everything, and I remember looking at like some of the rings, and I didn't know, something didn't feel right. And I didn't know about much of what I was receiving. I was like, I don't want to look at these rings. I was like, something about it is just like gives me the creeps. And the owner of the antique store was asking me, I think he was trying to pry a little bit into what I was picking up on. And what he said was, is that one of the rings, the woman was murdered and the ring was actually taken. And she was not happy about that. And somewhere down the line, I don't think he was aware of that. And I don't actually know the whole thing, but I think he became aware about it after he had already acquired the ring. Um, and that was just, an interesting thing. But uh, item empaths have the ability, again, to maybe touch and hold items that can take them to whatever feeling, to wherever that item came from. There are plant empaths. Plant empaths are people who, these might be the people who own nurseries or have these amazing gardens. These people have the ability to kind of tune into their plants. They might communicate with their plants and talk to them. They know when they need water. They know when they don't like the spot that they're in, when they need to be fertilized. It is a very interesting and cool skill set to observe, because I feel I get to kind of tune into that person's energy, and when you're watching them in their environment and they're like doing their thing, to just be an observer in that is, like I said, I geeked out. Um, but you might be able to spot them just by their garden and how it looks like their plants all communicate with each other. They might also prefer plants over people. uh, and then, the other one is dream empaths. These are people who might have very active dreams. They might have, their dreams um, might hold a lot of information. These people might get a lot of visits in their dreams. And uh, their dreams are just something that, dream empaths. Their dreams are very informative, but again, because the dreams work in a very interesting way and interesting ways, it's sometimes trying to figure out if there's anything to take for it. But dream empaths, um, just very active dreams. Those are all the empaths. and I think there's like 10 of them. So it's very interesting to just learn about how it can all overlap. And I'm trying to identify where you fall in line. Uh, my goal is by educating people so that way, when you are aware of what you're picking up on or how you're affected, um, you're able to at least figure out, what is being attached to um, what information you're receiving, and what you need or can do with it, and figuring out what your boundaries are. So, those are all the different Claire gifts, the psychic gifts, and I would love to hear if there's anything that you took away, um, if there's anything that I can elaborate on. Um, it's a lot of information to just kind of go off the top of my head and share with. So, to be continued, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk soon. Bye.